Trump White House official Navarro convicted of contempt after defying House January 6 subpoena. Washington, AP. Trump White House official Peter Navarro was convicted Thursday of contempt of Congress charges filed after he was accused of refusing to cooperate with a congressional investigation into the January 6, 2021, attack on the U.S. Capitol. The verdict came after a short trial for Navarro, who served as a White House trade advisor under President Donald Trump and later promoted the Republicans' baseless claims of mass voter fraud in the 2020 election he lost. Navarro was the second Trump aide to face contempt of Congress charges after former White House advisor Steve Bannon. Bannon was convicted of 2 counts and was sentenced to 4 months behind bars, though he has been free pending appeal. Prosecutors said Navarro acted as if he were above the law when he defied a subpoena for documents and a deposition from the House January 6 committee. He was charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress, both punishable by up to a year behind bars. A defense attorney argued Navarro didn't ignore the congressional subpoena but instead told committee staffers to contact Trump about what material might be covered by executive privilege, something they did not do. U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta ruled Navarro's executive privilege argument wasn't a defense against the charges, finding that Navarro hadn't shown evidence Trump invoked it. Prosecutors said that much of the material the committee sought was already publicly available and that Navarro should have handed over what he could and flagged any questions or documents believed to be protected under executive privilege. Trump faces a federal indictment in Washington, D.C., and a state indictment in Georgia over his efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss to Joe Biden, a Democrat. He has denied wrongdoing and has said he was acting within the law. The House January 6 committee finished its work in January, after a final report that said Trump criminally engaged in a multi-part conspiracy to overturn the lawful results of the 2020 election and failed to act to stop a mob of his supporters from attacking the Capitol. Time equals 400 ms, greater than ____. Follow the app's coverage of the U.S. Capitol insurrection at https://apnews.com/hub/capitol-siege. This is a breaking news update. App's earlier story follows below. Washington, AP. A jury began weighing contempt of Congress charges against Trump White House official Peter Navarro on Thursday over his failure to cooperate with a subpoena from the committee investigating the January 6, 2021, attack on the U.S. Capitol. Prosecutors argued that Navarro chose allegiance to former President Donald Trump over obeying a subpoena from the House panel investigating after a mob of the Republican supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol and interrupted the certification of the 2020 presidential vote for Joe Biden, a Democrat. Navarro, a former senior trade advisor, is charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress. A defense attorney argued Navarro didn't purposely ignore the House January 6 committee. Navarro instead told staffers to contact Trump about what might be protected by executive privilege, something that didn't happen, defense attorney Stanley Woodward argued. A judge has ruled the executive privilege argument isn't a defense against the charges, finding Navarro couldn't show that Trump had invoked it. But Woodward said prosecutors hadn't proven that Navarro acted willfully or only out of loyalty to Trump. Do we know that his failure to comply beyond reasonable doubt wasn't the result of accident, inadvertence or mistake? He said. Prosecutors, though, said Navarro should have handed over what material he could and flagged any questions or documents believed to be protected under executive privilege. Peter Navarro made a choice. He chose not abide by the congressional subpoena, prosecutor Elizabeth Alloy said. The defendant chose allegiance to former President Donald Trump over compliance to the subpoena. Navarro faces 2 charges, one for failing to produce documents and a second for failing to sit for a deposition. He faces up to a year behind bars on each count if convicted. Navarro was the second Trump aide to face contempt of Congress charges after former White House advisor Steve Bannon. Bannon was convicted of 2 counts and was sentenced to 4 months behind bars, though he has been free pending appeal. The House January 6 committee finished its work in January, after a final report that said Trump criminally engaged in a multi-part conspiracy, to overturn the lawful results of the 2020 election and failed to act to stop a mob of his supporters from attacking the Capitol.